What's going on? I'm just testing. Because I just recorded probably 40 something minutes worth of goddamn video and didn't even have the microphone on. When I tell you I'm so upset about that, I mean it was 40 something minutes, but I tell you what, I ain't finna do all that for this one. I'm just gonna kind of go through it. So let me go back through my notes. What was I talking about? This is gonna be about my son and his relationship with my used to be husband. Now, we were living out there in Colorado, and my used to be husband had he worked. I was a housewife. My son was going through some stuff, and he needed his mama for a little bit. And now I always said that I don't go nowhere where my son can't go, and that's ever since he was born, and I meant that. So he was able to, I sent for him, and he came out, and he stayed with us for a little while. He stayed in the basement, um, so that he would kind of like he still had his space and we had our space. But my used to be husband also used to work out of the basement. He had like an office down there, and everything was open. Nothing was closed off. It wasn't finished. It was an unfinished basement. So just to kind of so you give you a visual. Oh yeah, and it was a full basement, so it's a big space. Plus we had storage down there. Plus plumbing, HVAC system, all that stuff. Everything is down there, and it's all wide open in one big wide open space. It was walkout, so it had one, two, three windows and the door that led out to the patio. Anyway, he had started. My used to be husband started getting mean with me because of what he had been doing, which this is what this pretty much is all about with the narcissism and putting up with narcissistic abuse and stuff like that. So I led the whole story out with him cheating. So yeah, so we started out with him cheating, and that's when he started getting mean. And he really got mean once we moved into that house, which we wouldn't have moved in that house if I didn't get my disability money and paid off the bankruptcy and all that other shit, and then paying all the different fees and moving and all that because he made good money, but it wasn't that goddamn good. So just keep that in mind too. Like he made good money, but he still needed my check. Anyway, credit was good, so we had better credit and all that other stuff. So we were able to spend money and do things and stuff like that. And then my son came out, and then I felt like we were sharing the wealth, and it wasn't even like we were treating my son any more special than his two children because before we moved, we had his son there before, but for some reason, his mama didn't want him to have no birth certificate and none of that other stuff. So he was just there. He didn't have no ID, nothing. We sitting there trying to figure out ways to even get this little joker ID. And then finally, he decided he wants to go back so he can go on a cruise with his grandparents. I'm like, y'all whack bye. And then his other son, he was going through some stuff, and he has a son. And I was like, if you want, why don't you come out here, get yourself together? He was talking about getting a CDL or whatever. I was like, like get yourself together. Like, come on, like we got room or whatever. Plus, I'd love to get to know you. I never got to know his kids because of the so-called animosity between uh, my used to be husband and his ex-wife, which come to find out that's a bunch of bullshit because after all of that, when we split up, that's the first thing he did was catch a flight to go up there. He used to talk about how she was gay and all this other stuff, and I guess he went up there so he could be. Well, never mind. We can go. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, his son decided he didn't want to come, but he did come out to visit for a few days, but he didn't want to stay. So, but I was like, okay, we offered. Well, my son decided to take us up on the offer. He came out there and he went to school. He ended up he did a semester at the community college, and then he even got a full ride to MSU through a program called Call Me Mister. And he was working. He worked for the school system, and he was coaching middle school basketball. So he was doing pretty good, or so we thought. He wasn't making a lot of money, but we did expect for him to contribute to the household, um, which wasn't immediate. It was like a few months into it, and then we asked for a few $100s a month or whatever, and he paid for a few months, and then he didn't. So the first month I let him slide. I didn't say anything because I handled the household bills and the money was coming to me. So I didn't even bother him with it. because we didn't need it because I paid fucking bills anyway. But then he started getting mean to my sons, and like my son smoked, and we would smoke in the garage, and he would started telling him that if he wanted to smoke, he had to go outside. And then he started telling him that he couldn't even go outside; he had to go off the property. And then he started telling him that he couldn't eat unless he bought food. And then he started telling him that he could only take one shower a day. And then I'm like, okay, like he kind of getting out of hand. I was like, but I went with it because these are men, and I raised my son to be a man, even though my used to be husband was kind of in the household and kind of helped me raise him. But I always raised my son to, like you stand on your own. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if anything is going on, like let me know, talk to me, and let me know what was going on. And I'm starting to think that there was something that had happened between the two of them. I don't know what. Uh, but I'm starting to think that it was something that had happened between the two of them that for some reason my son felt like he couldn't tell me. And I think I need to insert this too because before we got married, I had a little list of questions that I asked my used to be husband. I asked him for one. I said, "Do you like children? Like, do you like boys? Like, do you like uh are you homosexual?" I asked him, have you ever been in a homosexual relationship? Have you ever been in a relationship with a child? And I also told him that he is allowed to talk to my son. He can correct him. I was like, but when it comes to discipline, he can talk to either myself or his father. And I made sure that he got to speak with his father, and they had a meeting and a greeting, and they exchanged numbers, dapped it up or whatever. They both military or ex-military. My his dad was still military at the time. He's retired now, but they went through all of that. So I let him know that you can do that, but you cannot touch him. And if I find out that you've ever touched him, that I will kill you. And I meant it. And I'm not going to say that I didn't trust him because he acted like he wanted to be a good husband and a stepfather, but because and it wasn't even because of him, because my son was also in sports and things like that. And I know that teachers and coaches and people like that will do things to children because I've been touched as a child, to the point to where I would actually inspect my son's body until he finally said, "Mom, I'm good, like you don't have to do that." And he was well in the high school. Let me just say that because that's the kind of mom I am. So before I go any further, again, I just wanted to say, baby, I keep my promises, okay? And to this day, I've never told you a lie. So let me keep going with that. Let's just say that he ended up finding out that my son hadn't been paying, and he decided he wanted to confront him. He was like, "Call him up here," and they exchanged words. My son was trying to explain, and I think what it was is my son. Yeah, what it was is he actually needed a deposit for his housing. Even though he had a full ride, he still had to come up with the deposit. And I was like, "You should have that because you work and you haven't paid us." And and then he was like, "Okay," and he just went back. And then he was like, my used to be husband was like, "No, call him back." And he started like with his mouth because he's sassy. He's a sassy man. Now, let me just say that they went back and forth, and he called him back and forth up and down them stairs a couple of times. He called my son a bum and a bitch and all this other stuff, even though he ended up being a fucking bum and a bitch that ended up having to go and staying with his mama too. But when he told my son to get out, and I was like, "Baby, just go. Like I'll make sure you ain't gonna have to stay outside." And then he was like, "I don't have anywhere to go." But then I had turned my back, and then next thing I know is I hear my son say, "What you got? You ain't got to pull the gun. What you pull the gun out for?" And when I tell you, this punk ass man used to walk around the house all the time because if he didn't have his gun, he wouldn't be nothing at all. But he pulled his gun out on my son, and then I just went into mama mode. And I don't know if it was the spirit or what, but I just turned around and I snatched that gun from that man. He was pointed at my baby, and I know my baby was 23 years old, and he is a grown man, but he had no business pulling that gun out on my son when my son was sitting down with his hands in his pocket. He was not a threat. And I snatched that gun from that man, and he did that fucking narcissistic thing, like, that fucking, if you've ever dealt with a narcissist, then you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I got the gun from him, and he immediately says, like if you tell he got on the phone and he called the police, and he said that my wife's son, we just got into a altercation, and my wife's son won't get out of the house. And that's when I was like, wait a minute, you used to always say this is my son, and now all of a sudden he's your wife's son. And I was like, okay. And then he looked at me in my eyes and he said, if you tell the police that I pulled the gun out on him, then I'm probably gonna go to jail, and then I won't be able to go to work, and we're gonna lose the house. And then I don't know. At that point, I felt like a fucking weak ass bitch, and then that's when I knew that was something wrong up here, because I knew better than that. And when the police got there, I honestly can say I didn't say any goddamn thing to the police. I went and I told my boy to get up and leave, and I went and I got my keys, and I went and I met him down. He was walking down the street with a backpack, and I went and picked him up, and I went and got him a room. And now I'm gonna fill in the blanks and tell you what happened later with that. But that's just to let you know that that's the kind of dude that he is. Like, and I'm pretty sure that with all of the stuff that he's gone, and because now he's a Christian and he's in the church, because he told me that's what he was going to do, and now all of a sudden he wants to be a granddaddy with the same grandbaby that he said wasn't his, and all that other stuff. But that's what he did to my son, the one that he swore he loved and that he raised as his own. He pulled the gun out on him. All right. The first thing I did was I let my son know that I was so ashamed. I was ashamed that I was married to that punk ass man, but my nervous system was so shot that I still protected him, and I stayed. Uh, Details coming in the next few stories.